People who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma have many questions. That's why we offer this free book.
Call toll-free at 1-800-400-5415.
O.J. Simpson appears before a parole board in Nevada today. Simpson is serving 8.5 years of what could be a 33-year sentence for a kidnapping and armed robbery conviction in 2007. CNN's Gene Casares has more for us from Nevada.
O.J. Simpson at his first parole hearing 4 years ago.
I arrived here in Alaska nearly 5 years ago.
Simpson is behind bars for a dozen crimes, including kidnapping and armed robbery, stemming from a showdown in a Las Vegas hotel with two sports collectors in September of 2007. Simpson claims he was taking back personal memorabilia that had been stolen from him, and he brought a small entourage.
Nothing but the truth to help you, God?
I do.
Bruce Framong, one of the victims, testified that O.J. wasn't armed, but says at least two other men were.
With a semi-automatic, basically pointed at my face.
Simpson was stoic when the guilty verdicts were read, but became emotional later at sentencing.
I wasn't there to hurt anybody. I just wanted my personal things, and I realized how stupid I'm sorry.
It was much more than stupidity.
His sentence, 9 to 33 years.
It was dubiously a crime, and to see the very long sentence that he got seems to me that he was being punished for the murder, even though the judge said he wasn't.
Simpson's lawyers believe it was payback for the not guilty verdicts in his 1994 double murder trial. Simpson was charged with killing his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. Back then, Simpson was revered for his Hall of Fame football career that he converted into media stardom. Televised for 8 months, the murder trial was a national obsession.
Gloves didn't fit. It doesn't fit. You must acquit.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
Nielsen reports over 52 million people watched the verdict. Later, Simpson lost a wrongful death suit and was ordered to pay the families of Nicole and Ron Goldman more than $33 million, forcing him to sell off precious possessions. But in 2007, made that fateful trip to Vegas. If Simpson is granted parole, freedom could come to him on or about the 22nd anniversary of the day he was cleared of murder. Gene Casares, CNN, Carson City, Nevada.
Boy, every time you see Shapiro and you see Cochran, and all the questions of the moments just come back, and now it culminates in this parole hearing today. Let's bring in CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, the definitive reporter of the O.J. Simpson's legal issues we're talking about.
The glove, you can't stop, right? I mean, everybody has such vivid memories.
And it was something where everything could break one way or the other, and it introduced so many topics to the American people about the justice system and what lawyering can mean and what juries can mean. And now here we are today. This isn't about the homicide case. This is about the burglary case. He was paroled with respect to certain charges already. But today will be his big day to clear the rest of the charges and maybe become a free man at the age of what? 70. So what do you make of the chances?
Well, everything I've learned about the Nevada system suggests that he will get parole. You know, there are not a lot of 70-year-olds in prison. You know, unless you're serving life without parole, older people are almost always paroled. And you know, I have said many times I think O.J. Simpson is guilty of the murders. He should be serving life without parole for those murders. This Nevada case is bogus. If he had not been O.J. Simpson, he never would have been prosecuted.
You don't think the burglary charges were strong enough?
I thought it was a ridiculous case. I thought it was basically a bunch of jerks yelling at each other in a hotel room. If he hadn't been O.J. And remember, the reason he was sentenced to so long, to 33 years, is that the judge said, well, you knew that those other people in the hotel room had guns. The people with guns got far less sentences than he did. So what does that tell you? It tells you it was a payback, yes.
All right, so what do we know about how this can go and what the factors are when he faces the parole board today?
Well, you know, parole hearings are much more informal than court proceedings. You don't have to have due process. You don't have to have, you know, the same kind of strict requirements. So the parole officers, the board, has a lot of discretion, and they can, you know, consider factors or not consider factors as they wish. If this were a normal case, and of course nothing with OJ is normal, it seems quite clear he would get parole. The real question that has always hovered around this Nevada case is how much is it really about the murders in Los Angeles? And that requires going into the heads of the people who are the decision makers here, and I can't do that. But if it's a normal process, he'll get out.
But again, they have full discretion. There are different layers of voting and things they can do. It could come down to a simple majority vote, but it's up to these commissioners whether or not it happens. They have a point system. Now, is it relevant at all in figuring out what can happen today that OJ's gone through this once before, and he was found to be very low risk on the charges he was offered parole on? They have a point scale, and the fewer points you have, the better.
Right.
And he had 3. Which winds up being a very relatively small number. Does that give you a window into how he may be judged today?
Yes, and the fact that he has a good disciplinary record in prison, the fact that he is older, and the fact that he was recommended for parole on some of the charges 4 years ago, it all suggests the conclusion that he will get parole today. Again, it's OJ, all bets are off, but in normal circumstances, all the signs point towards his release. Now, he wouldn't be released today. The way the system works, as I understand it, he would be released on October 1st.
And so he would get the word today, and then he'd have that final stint. And then the big question becomes, what is life for OJ outside of prison?
I think the answers would be a lot like his life after the acquittal in the criminal case, which means he became a pariah in his old life. You know, his glamorous life in Brentwood and being on
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Tucker from the Churchill Club. Welcome to our program called The Future of Batteries. Energy production options for applications like consumer devices, electric cars, and the home continue to grow and mature, but transmission is still inefficient. Visions abound, but we are still waiting for the big battery breakthrough. So the aim of this conversation is to explore the current state of battery technology and research and implications for innovation in how we produce and store energy, as well as what that implies and will enable in the times to come. So here to weigh in, we have a diverse and accomplished set of speakers. Qichao Hu from Solid Energy Systems, Mark Perutz from DBL Partners, Catherine Majaya from Advanced Microgrid Solutions, and Eric Westhoff from Green Tech Media. And here to lead them in conversation is Kevin Collins from Accenture. I really want to say thank you to Accenture, especially Kevin and then Julie Rosendahl as well, for their partnership in enabling this program in the first place. Please give them a hand, would you? Churchill Club is a nonprofit business and technology forum operating in the Bay Area now for 3 decades. We present up to 30 programs every year in support of people like you who are working to advance innovation and economic growth and also social good. We try to choose topics that are ripe with opportunity, that are not already over-discussed, that there's something new to add to the conversation. And we ask our speakers to share fresh insights and information and opinions, never to pitch or promote on our stage. We are member-supported, and we invite others in the audience to consider joining us. We would love to welcome you. If you're tweeting, please do use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you will find other Twitter codes in your bulletins. And with that, please, let's give our warmest welcome to Kevin, Qichao, Mark, Catherine, and Eric.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you to Churchill Club for just continuously putting on these interesting events. I love going to them, and the ones I don't go to, I try to watch on the website. Tonight's session is called The Future of Batteries, and I sort of felt like it could be called The Future of Everything because the impacts are so broad, but we felt that that was a little bit immodest, and so we kept it where it was. Our objective for tonight, our goal is for you to walk out of here with a perspective, not just on where the science is going, but on how the industry is changing and what it means for the applications and things, all the way from the grid, all the way down to the cell phone in your pocket. We will definitely save quite a bit of time for Q&A. We have an amazing group of people registered, a lot of interesting perspectives in the room, so we will cut some time for you all to ask questions of these esteemed panelists, and so we'll certainly do that. I'm going to ask each of these folks to introduce themselves briefly in just a couple of minutes, but before I do, I just wanted to spend maybe 2-3 minutes and tee up what we're going to talk about tonight. So, in battery technology, I have a friend who's a researcher, a battery researcher, and I sat down with her and talked to her a little bit about, how do you think about this and how do you talk about the space? And she said, whenever I meet with people who aren't in this space, I always start off by comparing battery technology to VCRs. And she said, VCRs allow me to time shift media consumption, batteries allow me to time shift power and energy consumption. And she said that the grid and the way that the power system is set up now is meant like old network TV. It's meant for immediate consumption, it's out there, and if you're late for Dynasty, you're late for Dynasty. And so batteries really changed that whole game dramatically, and they allow me to, to time shift and do things when it's cheap and when it's efficient and when it's effective. There's an article, I just want to get this right. There's an interview recently that I saw on The Verge. Mark Andreessen gave an interview about batteries. He was talking about flying cars and a million things, but then he said this, he said, the single biggest X factor in the next 5 or 10 years for all of this stuff will be if there's some fundamental breakthrough in battery technology. Then basically all of the questions of what's possible get reopened. If I had 10 or 100 times the amount of power that lasts 10 or 100 times longer, then we'd be building Iron Man suits. Then all kinds of things start to happen. So it's important. I mean, we saw the governor announce that we're trying to get 1.5 million electric vehicles on the California roadways by 2025. The largest, most expensive component of an electric vehicle is a battery. If you think about your cell phone, your tablet, a key part of the user experience is the battery. And there's a funny cartoon I saw that said, in the old days, the biggest fears were like public speaking and spiders, and now it's no Wi-Fi and empty batteries. So it's really a key part of our experience of the devices that we interact with. And then also, if you think about our green solutions, our climate change solutions, they all depend on this technology. So it's a big deal. And from a consumer standpoint, what we've seen is that the devices that batteries interact with seem to have innovations every year. And all kinds of crazy new stuff coming out and all these new breakthroughs. And at least as a user, what we don't see is the same thing in the battery itself. Now, we have manufacturing innovations, and we have power sticking chip innovations and algorithm innovations and all kinds of things around it. But the core lithium-ion battery is kind of not dramatically different than what we saw in 1991. Now, a lot of people in this room are kind of cringing and saying, that's not really true. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to talk about that with this group.
Before we begin the news, Joe, the president, well, this is a president who said, and I'll quote his words here, "You're going to have such great health care at a tiny fraction of the cost, and it's going to be so easy." That was October of 2016, Joe.
Well, you know, and Mark Halperin has said all along, the greatest risk to Donald Trump, the greatest risk to the Republican majority may not be the Russian scandals, it may not be the indiscriminate tweeting, it may not be the unpresidential behavior, it may not be the questioning of checks and balances, it may not be actually throwing aside every sacred tradition in the United States government over the past 240 years. It may be the inability to get things done, because Donald Trump's chief promise, above everything else, was, I can make Washington work. It's broken, but don't worry, I'm a deal maker. This is easy. We're going to do so much, and we're going to win so much that you're going to get tired of winning. And what he's actually finding is, as somebody said earlier this morning, that it's much easier to stamp your name on buildings, on stakes, and on online university courses than it is to actually run Washington, D.C. and get significant legislation passed. And this was quite the failure, Mika, after he continued to promise he was going to get it done. And you remember the Rose Garden celebration a couple of months ago? The president forgot that you have to pass it through the House and the Senate. So this is doubly humiliating for him this morning.
And for everyone, really, because I'm not sure if this president thought that throwing a party like that perhaps would attract senators to jump on board. It's just all kind of seems like child's play. Like he thinks this is child's play, and it's clearly failing at this point. Here's what we've got so far. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is pulling the plug on the Republicans' current plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. The news comes after Senators Mike Lee and Jerry Moran both announced their opposition to the legislation last night. With a 52-seat majority, Republicans could only afford to lose 2 votes, and Senators Rand Paul and Susan Collins had already said they would not support the bill for separate reasons. Last night, McConnell released a statement saying, in part, regretfully, it is now apparent that the effort to repeal and immediately replace the failure of Obamacare will not be successful. So in the coming days, the Senate will vote to take up the House bill, with the First Amendment order being what a majority of the Senate has already supported in 2015, and that was vetoed by then President Obama, a repeal of Obamacare, with a 2-year delay to provide for a stable transition period. Shortly before that statement came out, President Trump tweeted, Republicans should just repeal failing Obamacare now and work on a new health care plan that will start from a clean slate. Dems will join in. Earlier in the evening, President Trump held a dinner with several Republican lawmakers. Officials described it as the collaborative strategy session with senior members familiar with tough legislative battles. According to Politico, President Trump told Republicans at the dinner the party would look like, quote, dopes if they couldn't pass the health care bill after passing a repeal bill in 2015. After Senators Lee and Moran announced their opposition, Senator John McCain, who is recovering from surgery, released a statement calling for a bipartisan solution to health care. He said, in part, Congress must now return to regular order, hold hearings, receive input from members of both parties, and heed the recommendations of our nation's governors so that we can produce a bill that finally provides Americans with access to quality and affordable health care. Joe, this has been in the Republicans' laps for a long time. They've been saying they want to do this for years, and still nothing.
Well, still nothing, and one of the biggest problems actually for the Republicans is having a president that you just can't trust. You know, Chris Christie made the news yesterday by talking about how the meeting with the Russians probably was breaking the law. A lot of people say, well, that's revenge served up cold. Actually, Chris Christie is a perfect example of how disloyal Donald Trump is. Christie was the first to get out support Donald Trump. He was used and then abused on the vice presidency, strung out, told he'd get the position of Attorney General. He didn't get that. And Mark Halperin, Republicans in the Senate are saying that he did the same exact thing to all the Republican House members that he and Steve Bannon kept threatening and said, you better do this or else. Well, they pushed and got a House bill passed by the barest of margins in the U.S. House. And a month or two later, Donald Trump is calling it a, quote, mean bill. So when he says Republicans will look like dopes if they don't pass the legislation, that's what a lot of members, as you know, on Capitol Hill are saying this president looks like, because he can't be trusted. He hasn't shown any guidance on health care reform, and he's left them out there on their own. How bad of a day was it for Donald Trump yesterday when you had the health care legislation yanked, and then he wakes up this morning to a Wall Street Journal editorial that says that both he and his family